Welcome back. It's still July 14th, 2016, and this is still your morning edition here on i24 News. The relationship between Israel and the EU has been tested in the past, with the European body critical of Israel's settlement expansion and Jerusalem shunning the quartet's efforts to advance peace between Israel and the Palestinians. The most recent point of tension, however, was the EU's critical response over the recent NGO bill. i24 News diplomatic correspondent Eli Hochenberg looked at the relationship between the parties, and we'll take it up with Ambassador Lars Anderson right after.
Growing mistrust, regular fights, and a whole lot of tension. Relations between Israel and the European Union may not have hit rock bottom yet, but the years of constructive cooperation seems to be long gone. In recent time, Brussels and Jerusalem have engaged time and again in public disputes on a wide range of issues, from the Israeli discontent over Europe's interest in its arch rival Iran, through Brussels' harsh criticism of Jerusalem's hawkish policies, all the way to the limping French-led peace initiative. While Europe attempts to preserve its influence in the Middle East, Jerusalem seems to be trying to undermine its position. Israel's vocal objections to the French push for peace and its recent collaboration with Egypt at the expense of Paris is only the latest indication to the piling up hostilities.
Yes.
Brussels, for its part, was quick to unequivocally critique Israel's new passed NGO bill, seeking to reduce foreign involvement in Israeli internal affairs, deeming it as damaging to Israel's democratic nature. With sides looking at regional and global developments in somewhat opposing perceptions, it is becoming more and more difficult to imagine relations between the EU and Israel going back to their glory days.
Thank you. Thank you.
EU Ambassador Lars Anderson joins us now from Herzliya. Good morning, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for joining us. As we just heard in the report, our diplomatic correspondent, thank you, characterized current relations as tense. How would you characterize them at the moment?
I don't think that relations are tense. We have a very broad-based relationship between the European Union and Israel. We have many, many areas in which we cooperate very closely to our mutual benefit, and we have a couple of areas where we have some differences, but we have an open and very frank dialogue about those differences. Nothing has changed in that, so I think the relations are on very stable ground.
Now, the EU and Israel tweeted, the new NGO law in Israel goes beyond legitimate needs of transparency, risks undermining our shared values. Can you elaborate on this tweet, and why should the public not have the right to know which foreign governments are involved in Israeli affairs?
Well, as the statement says, this goes beyond transparency. It's quite obvious that it's only targeting a very specific number of NGOs that are receiving funding from public sources abroad, whereas there is no mentioning of the NGOs that are receiving very substantial private funding from abroad. And also, I think in general that Israel should be proud and promote its very vibrant and active civil society, which is an integral part of a thriving democracy, and not be engaged in closing down space for civil society organizations. So I think this goes far beyond the question of transparency. It's more a question of putting certain NGOs that have opinions that differ from those maybe of the majority on the spot here, and making their activity more difficult.
Thank you for that clarification. However, I do have to mention that one day after the bill is passed, a congressional investigation from the United States conclude that the U.S. State Department paid hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayers' grants to support a campaign to oust Netanyahu. Isn't this exactly what the bill would want to make transparent?
Well, I don't know anything about that particular case, so I don't want to comment on that. It's our firm conviction that the laws that are already in place and which allows for full disclosure through the NGO register of funding and so on and so forth for these organizations would suffice, and there's really no need for additional measures to be taken here. And also, let me remind you again that I think one of the concerns that we have is that this law does not apply across the spectrum. It applies only to a certain number of civil society organizations that are involved in issues which are found to be critical or they are being critical maybe of certain government policies, and this we think is unwarranted.
Now, Mr. Ambassador, I'd like to talk about a different burning issue, which unfortunately, for you perhaps, seems to be fading, the French initiative. Israel's efforts to block any European involvement could be seen as a slap in the face, wouldn't you say?
Well, as you know, there are several initiatives revolving around the peace process and the preservation of the two-state solution currently. One of them is the French initiative. Another one is the Quartet report, which had some very clear recommendations, very balanced recommendations to both parties that came out just over a week ago. Then there has also been a very interesting and potentially very fruitful contact with the Egyptian foreign minister here in Jerusalem just last week. And we will have to see how all these things can match up and collectively stir again some motion on the whole issue of the peace process, and also on preserving the two-state solution, which is gradually being eroded on a daily basis. And we think that it's absolutely vital to proceed, and that's really the objective of all the three initiatives that I have been talking about here, the Egyptian, the French, and also the Quartet report, to take some steps on the ground of a confidence-building nature which can pave the way again for resumption of political discussions between the parties. This is exactly also, I think, what the Israeli government is striving for.
So what I understand from you is that the EU is supporting all three initiatives as long as negotiations are indeed advanced. Now, I'd like to actually turn away from Israel and look at Europe and the Brexit. Theresa May just took on her role as Prime Minister in the UK. Are you fearing a wave of leaves following Brexit, and could this be the beginning of the end for the EU?
Well, I think it's far too early to draw sweeping conclusions like that. We have a special situation in the UK. There was a referendum. I, along with many others, regret the result of that referendum. But the verdict of the British voters obviously will have to be respected. And now we are waiting to see how the British government and also Mrs. May, the new Prime Minister, is going to handle the situation. The next logical step, as you know, will be for the British government to invoke Article 50 of the treaty, which sets out a time frame and a procedure for exiting the European Union. And until such time, there's really not much more to discuss, because until such time, the UK remains a full-fledged member of the European Union. You're right in saying that there are discontent in a number of quarters in member states about the European Union and the way it's working. I think there's a big pedagogical task for European politicians to explain better to their public what the advantages of the European Union is and how it affects their lives. There's maybe also a need to be clear about what is union competence and what is national competence, in order for people not to feel that decisions are taken by distant bureaucracy in Brussels. But these things are really in the hands, I think, of national political leaders who must explain better to their publics what the European Union project is about. I don't see currently in any other EU countries the kind of movement that we have seen in Britain. So I think that any prediction that this will set in a wave of similar referenda is not really justified at this point in time.
And also you did mention that the UK is part of the EU until Brexit is indeed carried out, and we'll have to see when that happens and how. I'd like to talk to you about the Iran deal, as it's 1 year since it was signed. It's the 1 year anniversary. Some will say celebrated, some would say disappointed. Did you expect more of it?
Well, I can't see really that I expected more of it. As I understand it, the Iranians have complied with their obligations under the deal. The issue here in Israel and also in other places around the world has been the scope of this particular deal. There's been regret, criticism that the deal was not more comprehensive, did not address aspects of Iranian foreign policy, including in this region, support for terrorist organizations and so on and so forth. I just note that these issues are not explicitly part of the deal, but alongside the deal, these are issues that we are taking now up in our renewed dialogue with Iran. The European Union, as a number of other international actors, have now reinforced and resumed their dialogue, political dialogue with Iran, and we now have an opportunity to address these issues, Iranian support for terror organizations in the region, questions of the human rights situation internally in Iran, and other issues which we didn't really have an opportunity to address directly with the Iranians before. But of course, things do not, particularly on these matters, happen overnight, and we are in for a long haul, I think, with Iran also, but the process has started, and I think that it has started fairly well.
One stretch of the marathon as you see it. Ambassador Lars Anderson, thank you very much for weighing in this morning. And let's say hello and good morning to Mohammed El-Qassam, here to bring us with this morning's headlines from the Middle East and around the world. What do you have for us this morning?
Well, let's start with the New York Times main headline. It's basically it was a auditioning time for GOP presumptive nominee Donald Trump. He was stuck in Indiana yesterday. He had a flat tire. His plane had a flat tire. So he met with three maybe vice president choices for him.
Which will announce tomorrow?
Exactly. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. New York City time, he will announce his choice for vice president, his running mate. But he met yesterday with former Georgia Congressman Newt Gingrich and Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama. But the main star yesterday was Indiana's Governor Mike Pence, who he met his family yesterday. Donald Trump was also with his family, and it looks like his star is rising.
Very close and tightening relationship.
Yes, yes.
Indeed, so we'll wait for tomorrow's announcement. What else do we have this morning?
From Al Jazeera English, we have the killing of the Minister of War for the Islamic State in Iraq and in Syria and the Levant.
A big blow for the Islamic State.
A huge setback.
Another
setback
the
for
latest
them.
in a string of blows, in fact, for them
That's
as they
correct.
lose ground in Iraq.
They lost Fallujah. The Iraqi army and its allies, as well as the American Air Force, now are shifting target or shifting focus toward Mosul, and this is a huge setback for the Islamic State. Omar al-Shishani was in charge of all their operations, and apparently he has been dead for quite some time, at least for 4 months. We'll move along. We'll go to Al-Quds Al-Arabi, a newspaper out of London. It talks about how Turkey has been losing some influence over Syria, and now we are hearing more and more of Turkish officials talking about maybe normalizing relationships with Syria.
Which is quite a 180-degree turn.
Huge turn now, and it doesn't vote well for the Syrian opposition.
And
Finally, we go to Haaretz, and it talks about the 10th anniversary of the Second Lebanon War, and it says that it's not so much about Lebanon or Hezbollah and Israel, it's more about internal Lebanese issues as well as Lebanon and Syria.
And no one's interested in this opening this front.
Not at all. Not
so
at all.
At the moment, the inside conflict is taking and shifting the attention away.
That's correct.
And do we have one last one for this morning?
We probably should talk about Al Arabiya story, Al Arabiya English story, about this solar plane that landed yesterday in Cairo and on its last destination in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. It's been flying for quite some time. This is a huge scientific project. It's a huge scientific because it deals with significant deals with the solar power. But I think it's quite some time before it actually becomes a reality.
Mohammed Al-Qasim, thank you very much for your insight this morning with headlines around the world. Coming up on the show, a trip down memory lane in our This Week in History segment. But first, let's hear some more of this morning's headlines.